and welcome back to our channel. I'm Jennifer and this is Kate, and it is First Holy Communion season here, which is a wonderful time of year because it really puts a spotlight on receiving Jesus in the Eucharist.
But today we wanted to talk about what to do during Mass after you have received communion. And we all know that we should go back to our pew and pray, but what prayers do you say? How long do you say them for? Can you do anything else during that time?
So today we want to offer you 4 different things that you can do after communion so that you can make the most of your time with Jesus.
And we also have some suggestions of what you can do if your mind is wandering during Mass.
And we are going to look at the interesting question that comes up sometimes about fasting. Now, we all know Catholics should fast for an hour before Mass, but should you also be fasting after Mass? All right, so you are at Mass and you have just received communion and you're back in your pew. So let's think about that. This is really an amazing time. Jesus is physically present with you for the next 15 minutes. You are never going to be closer to him on earth than you are in those few minutes after communion.
And since he's right there with you, you probably want to make the most of that time. You don't really want to spend your 15 minutes just watching people go past in line or daydreaming about donuts after church.
I like donuts.
So what can you do to make the most of that time? Or in different words, what is your post-communion game plan?
So that's a question that I love to ask my students. I ask them, after you receive communion during Mass and you go back to your seat, what should you be doing? And they all freeze and just look at me with blank stares. And that's okay, I get it, because they are older students, high school and middle school, and it's been a long time since they have received their first communions. So in the intervening years, they've gotten a little bit fuzzy on the whole idea of what should we do after communion, which is why I wanted to talk about it today.
Giving those kids and adults a post-communion game plan is a great way to refocus their minds on Jesus and prevent a lot of mind wandering during Mass. So now we're going to move into our list of 4 things that you can do to make the most of your time with Jesus.
All right, so the first thing to do when you're walking back to your seat after communion is to remember to be just as reverent as you were before you received, maybe even more reverent, because now Jesus is right there with you. But we're human, and so it's easy, and I see this a lot, especially in older kids, that, hey, I received communion, I'm just going back to my pew, it's fine. We probably could all stand to improve a little bit in that area.
And also notice how we said walking back to the pew, because leaving right after communion is kind of like going to a dinner party and eating and then immediately afterward running out the door. Most of us wouldn't eat and run like that.
So I read a very interesting article recently, and in it the author said, if you're tempted to leave Mass after communion, then think back to the Last Supper, which was really the very first Mass, right? And think about who was the only person who left the first Mass right after communion? Judas.
The second thing that you can do when you get back to your pew after communion is to thank God for truly being present with you in that moment, and to thank him for dying on the cross for us, and thank him for the priest that gave you communion that day. And you can also thank him that you were able to receive communion that day, because so many people throughout the world can't freely go to Mass, and we're truly blessed.
A third thing you can do is to offer up your communion for someone in particular or for a special intention, because Jesus is right there with you. He is listening to every single word that you say, and the prayers that you say at communion have more weight to them than at any other time.
A fourth thing that you can do is have a set prayer or prayers that you always say after communion, and that's where having a communion plan becomes very helpful, because if you just tell your kids to say a prayer after communion, that's pretty vague. Like, what prayers do you say?
Yeah, so maybe you can teach them a certain prayer or give them a prayer card so that they know that after communion, this is the prayer that I should be saying. So which prayer? Well, the Our Father and the Hail Mary, they always work. Or if you want to get fancier, you can say the Anima Christi, which is a very beautiful prayer and especially great for communion, and we'll link that down below for you.
or you could say an act of faith, hope, or love, and we'll also have those linked below.
Or you could even say the divine praises, which starts, "Blessed be God, blessed be his holy name." And no, you don't have to have, 50 different prayers memorized. That's where having like a prayer card or a missal or a cheat sheet really comes in handy. And sometimes just having a prayer card for kids to hold, that is a good physical reminder. Oh yeah, I should be saying this prayer after communion.
Or if your kid has the Child's Magnificat or their own prayer book, you can also mark a prayer for them before Mass, and then you can help them find it to say after communion.
Now, what about all you young parents out there, and you've got kids that you're taking care of during Mass, and you're just trying to get through to the end of Mass, and you don't really have the time to just sit down by yourself and have special time with Jesus? Well, if that's you, no worries, because what you can do is just offer up the act of caring for your children during Mass as a gift and a prayer for Jesus, and that is very pleasing to him.
But what if you're completely distracted by all the people going by you? Well, you can always close your eyes, or you can just look down at your pew and make an extra effort not to watch everyone. And if you're afraid that you might fall asleep if you close your eyes, you can sing and offer that up as a prayer, especially if you don't normally sing or don't like to.
And so now, what do you do if you're in Mass and despite your best intentions, your mind just keeps on wandering? You're planning that grocery shopping trip or the soccer game or whatever. Well, once upon a time, a long time ago, I read something that has always stayed with me. And the advice was, if your mind wanders at Mass, think of Jesus and the crown of thorns. Think of that crown of thorns being put on his head and the blood dripping down his face and the pain that he felt and how much he suffered for us. And that will snap you back into the present moment very quickly.
So now let's quickly look at the question of whether or not, as Catholics, we have to fast after communion. Now, we all know we have the 1 hour fast before communion, but do we or do we not have to do the same afterwards? Because if so, it's not looking good for that monthly pancake breakfast.
Well, I have good news. The pancake breakfast is safe because as of this moment, there is no official church requirement to fast after communion, although many people do like to fast for 15 minutes out of reverence for Jesus. But let's think about it. If you receive communion and then you stay through the end of Mass and then you walk across to the parish center and get in line, by the time you've done all that, it's going to be 15 minutes and you can go ahead and enjoy those pancakes.
All right, so we hope you enjoyed the video, that you got some good ideas for what to do after communion and how to make the most of your time with Jesus.
So if you have any special things that you do after communion or any prayers that you would like to share with us, we would love to hear those. Leave us a comment.
Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.